Have you ever wondered why the US dollar is everywhere? From a street market in Bangkok to a high-end store in Paris, the dollar is king. It's the currency of global trade, the benchmark for commodities, and the safe haven everyone runs to in a crisis. We call this the dollar empire. But like all empires, it has a history, a present reality, and a future that might be more fragile than we think. Today, we're going on a journey through time from the ashes of World War II to the digital age to understand how this empire was built, why it's so powerful, and why its foundations might be showing cracks. Stick around, because what we uncover affects every single dollar in your pocket. Our story begins in 1944 in a small town in New Hampshire called Bretton Woods. The world was in ruins. To rebuild and create a stable global economy, 44 allied nations came together. They needed a reliable system, a new anchor for global finance. The British pound, the old king, was fading along with its empire. The United States, on the other hand, emerged from the war as the undisputed economic and military powerhouse. It held over 2/3 of the world's gold reserves. So the Bretton Woods Agreement was born. It created a new world order where other currencies were pegged to the US dollar, and the US dollar itself was pegged to gold at a fixed rate of $35 an ounce. This meant any country could, in theory, exchange its dollars for a specific amount of US gold. This masterstroke cemented the dollar's position as the world's reserve currency. It was stable, reliable, and backed by the largest gold hoard on the planet. For a while, this system worked beautifully. It fueled the post-war economic boom, a golden age of growth and stability. The dollar empire seemed permanent, an unshakable pillar of the modern world. But permanence is often an illusion. Fast forward to the late 1960s. The illusion of permanence was starting to fray. The US was funding the costly Vietnam War and expansive domestic social programs, what was known as the guns and butter policy. To pay for all this, it started printing more money than it had gold to back it up. Other countries, particularly France, grew nervous. They saw the US running its printing presses and realized their dollar reserves were being devalued. They started calling America's bluff, showing up and demanding gold for their dollars, as was their right under Bretton Woods. The US gold reserves began to dwindle rapidly. The situation was becoming untenable. Then, on August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon made a shocking announcement. He unilaterally closed the gold window, officially ending the direct convertibility of the US dollar to gold. This event, known as the Nixon shock, severed the dollar's last link to a physical asset. Overnight, the world's financial system changed forever. The dollar, and by extension all major currencies, became fiat money, backed by nothing but faith and credit in the government that issued it. The Bretton Woods system was dead, but strangely, the dollar empire didn't crumble. In fact, it entered a new, even more powerful phase. So if the dollar wasn't backed by gold anymore, what was it backed by? The simple answer is trust in the full faith and credit of the United States. But there was also a clever geopolitical move. In the mid-1970s, the US struck a deal with Saudi Arabia and other major oil producers. They would sell their oil exclusively in US dollars. In return, the US would provide military protection. This created the petrodollar system. Every country that needed to buy oil, which was pretty much every country first, had to get US dollars. This created a massive, constant, artificial demand for the dollar. It didn't matter if it was backed by gold. It was now backed by oil, the lifeblood of the industrial world. This allowed the US to do something extraordinary. It could run huge trade deficits, buying more from the world than it sold, and pay for it by simply printing more money. Other countries would take these dollars and, instead of letting them sit, would reinvest them back into US assets like treasury bonds. This helped finance America's government debt at low interest rates. It was the perfect feedback loop. America prints dollars, buys goods, the world takes those dollars and lends them back to America. For decades, this system has been the engine of the global economy and the foundation of American power. This brings us to the present day. The system of debt, deficits, and money creation has become standard operating procedure. Whenever there's a crisis, the 2008 financial crash, the 2020 pandemic, the response is the same. The Federal Reserve steps in and creates trillions of new dollars out of thin air to inject into the financial system. This is done through policies like quantitative easing, or QE, where the central bank buys government bonds and other assets. The stated goal is to keep the economy stable, prevent collapses, and encourage lending and investment. And in a way, it works. But it has a profound side effect. All this new money has to go somewhere. A lot of it flows directly into financial markets. This is why we see the stock market hitting all-time highs, real estate prices soaring, and even things like cryptocurrencies and art reaching astronomical valuations. We are living through a massive asset price inflation. Your 401k might look great. Your house might be worth more than ever. It feels like we're all getting richer. But are we? Here is the other side of the coin. While the prices of assets we own are going up, the value of the money we use every day is going down. This is the difference between asset price inflation and the decline in purchasing power. The price of groceries, gas, healthcare, and education keeps rising, often faster than wages. That dollar in your pocket simply doesn't buy what it used to. The very act of creating money to pump up asset prices inherently devalues the currency itself. So, we're in a strange paradox. Our net worth on paper might be increasing, making us feel wealthy. But our ability to afford the basic necessities of life is getting harder. The wealth effect from rising assets masks the quiet erosion of our living standards caused by a depreciating currency. The dollar empire has made holding financial assets very profitable, but it has come at the cost of the dollar's core function as a stable store of value for the average person. It's a silent tax on savers and wage earners. Now, does any of this sound familiar? It should. History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. Let's look back at the Roman Empire. The Roman denarius was the dollar of its day, a trusted silver coin used across the ancient world. But as the empire overextended itself with endless wars and lavish spending, its leaders found a clever way to pay their bills. They started debasing the currency. They would melt down the silver coins, mix in cheaper metals like copper, and mint more coins from the same amount of silver. At first, no one noticed. But over time, the silver content of the denarius dropped from nearly 100% to less than 5%. People lost faith in the money. Commerce broke down, inflation ran rampant, and it contributed to the eventual decline and fall of the Western Roman Empire. Hundreds of years later, we see a similar story with the British Empire and the pound sterling. For over a century, the pound was the world's reserve currency. But the immense costs of 2 world wars drained Britain's coffers. It went from being the world's biggest creditor to its biggest debtor. Faith in the pound eroded, and the US dollar, backed by a booming economy and a mountain of gold, was ready to take its place. The transition wasn't overnight, but it was decisive. History shows a clear pattern. When great powers overspend, go into debt, and devalue their currency, their global economic dominance eventually wanes. So here we are. The US is the world's largest debtor nation, running massive deficits and creating currency on a scale never seen before. Yet many people believe this time is different. They argue the US is unique. The dollar's dominance is so entrenched, there's no viable alternative. The US military is unparalleled, and the network effects of the dollar system are too strong to break. And for now, they are right. Where else would global capital go? The euro has its own structural problems. The Chinese yuan isn't fully convertible and lacks the trust of a transparent legal system. But to assume this situation will last forever is to ignore the lessons of Rome and Britain. The world is slowly but surely starting to de-dollarize. Countries are trading in their own currencies. Central banks are diversifying their reserves into gold. New financial systems are being built that bypass the dollar. These are not overnight changes. They are slow tectonic shifts. The danger isn't a sudden collapse, but a gradual erosion of trust. A slow decline that one day becomes an undeniable reality. The greatest risk we face is complacency, the belief that the dollar's supremacy is a law of nature rather than a historical arrangement that can, and eventually will, change. Understanding this story isn't about being pessimistic. It's about being realistic. It helps us understand why our cost of living is rising, why financial markets feel disconnected from the real economy, and why the global landscape is shifting. The dollar empire has brought decades of stability and prosperity, but its current path is unsustainable. Being aware of its history and its vulnerabilities is the first step toward preparing for whatever comes next. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this breakdown of the dollar empire insightful, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the forces that shape our world. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next video.